It was the kind of morning that should have started with family chatter, last-minute wardrobe changes, and a dozen snapshots on someone's phone. The living room at the Langston house in Meadowbrook, Colorado, had been cleaned the night before. Balloons were taped to the stair railing, muffins were warming in the oven, and Sierra's little sister, Jess, had ironed her white graduation gown twice out of nervous excitement. But the one person who promised she'd never miss it wasn't there. Sierra Langston, 21, wasn't someone who slipped up. She was the kind of person who sent thank you cards, always showed up 10 minutes early, and texted her mom goodnight even after the longest days. She loved animals more than people, they used to joke. Maybe because animals never disappointed you. That morning, her absence wasn't just inconvenient. It was impossible. At first, her mother, Melanie, rationalized it. Maybe Sierra stayed over at a friend's place. Maybe her phone had died. Maybe she was already at the venue. But every maybe became less believable with each passing minute. By 9 a.m., there were too many unanswered calls, and the muffins were starting to burn in the oven. By 9:40 a.m., Jess's voice cracked as she kept glancing at the door, expecting her sister to walk in any second. By 10:15 a.m., they drove to the ceremony without her, leaving a carefully ironed dress hanging on the back of the front door. And by 11 a.m., as Jess crossed the stage in her cap and gown, Sierra's seat in the front row of the audience was still empty. That was when the worry stopped being quiet. Sierra wasn't just anyone in Meadowbrook. She was that student at Meadowbrook State College who everyone knew, even if they didn't know her personally. Bright, independent, always biking across campus with a coffee cup in hand and her headphones dangling from her neck. Her anthropology professor once called her stubborn in all the ways that changed the world. And she was, until the night she didn't come home. After the ceremony, the family returned to the house. Sierra still wasn't there. No notes. No signs she'd come back at all. Her bed was untouched. Her phone still rang, but no one picked up. That's when Travis Doyle's name came up. He was a friend. Maybe more once, maybe not anymore. The kind of guy who lingered in that middle space between familiarity and uncertainty. Sierra had mentioned he'd be at the Violet Room, a local music spot they liked. That was where she'd been the night before. Live bands, loud lights, cheap drinks. Travis had posted a selfie from there on Instagram. So Melanie called him. Travis answered on the second ring, sounding groggy but cooperative. Yes, they were at the club together. Yes, Sierra had gone back with him for food. No, nothing weird happened. She left his place around 1:45 a.m., said she was tired, wanted to bike home. That was the last he saw her. She said she didn't want to crash on my couch, he mumbled. She just left. It didn't sit right. It shouldn't have been the end of her story. By dusk, panic had replaced hope. Melanie filed a missing persons report that evening. Local police at first followed standard protocol. Wait, observe, contact hospitals. Sierra was an adult, and Meadowbrook wasn't new to college students going off-grid for a night. But something in Melanie's voice, in her certainty, made one officer take it more seriously than usual. Detective Mariah Keene got the case by 10:30 p.m. A seasoned investigator with sharp instincts and tired eyes, she took her first look at Sierra's photo. Bright hazel eyes, half smile, auburn braid over one shoulder, and something inside her stilled. She'd seen missing posters before. Hundreds of them. But this one felt present. Alive. Like someone who wasn't meant to be on paper. The next day began with surveillance. Cameras outside the Violet Room showed Sierra and Travis entering around 10:45 p.m., laughing, relaxed. 2.5 hours later, they left together. No signs of distress. No arguments. Just a typical night out. Then came the gas station cameras. The pair were seen again at a taco spot off Hillcrest Drive, ordering food just before 1:15 a.m. Still calm. Still normal. Then, separation. Travis drove home. Sierra biked alone. She was captured on 3 additional cameras, steadily riding down Oak Ridge Avenue, her backpack bouncing lightly with each pedal stroke. The last image of her came from a city bus camera at 1:51 a.m., passing her by on Stanton Road. The timestamp matched Travis's statement. Everything checked out. Until it didn't. One more camera, positioned just 2 blocks before Sierra would have turned into her neighborhood, showed something strange. A white Chevy Silverado driving unusually slow behind her. Not overtaking. Not swerving. Just matching her pace. Cyclists average around 10 to 12 miles per hour at night, especially on uphill terrain. A truck driving that slow at 2 a.m. isn't just odd, it's intentional. The plate number wasn't visible. The footage was grainy. But the behavior was clear. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone was following Sierra Langston. And from that moment on, nothing in the investigation was routine anymore. By the end of day 2, search parties had been mobilized. Flyers printed. Tips trickled in, none useful. Some claimed they saw her at a gas station near the county line. Others swore she was at a bus terminal in Northvale. But Keene knew the truth was simpler and darker. A girl like Sierra didn't just disappear because she wanted to. She was taken. They call Meadowbrook a safe town, on paper. Clean sidewalks, busy farmers' markets, a college that keeps things just lively enough. But late at night, around the edges, it starts to peel. There are places where the lights don't quite reach, streets where people stop locking their eyes with strangers. That's where Sierra Langston last rode her bike. 2 days after her disappearance, the center of everything became the Violet Room, a small music venue just off Ashbury Street. Not upscale, not grimy. It was where students went when they wanted something loud enough to forget the week, but not wild enough to regret the next day. According to the timeline put together by Detective Mariah Keene, Sierra arrived at 10:42 p.m., walking her bike alongside Travis Doyle, a longtime friend from campus. Security footage confirmed it. They entered together, smiling, relaxed. Inside, they ordered drinks, stuck near the back of the crowd, and watched 2 local bands play their sets. Staff members said they were regulars. Sierra wasn't drinking heavily, just a beer. Nothing in the footage suggested a fight, an argument, or anything out of place. Travis laughed at her jokes. She leaned in close to talk. Everything looked normal. But the case had already taught Keene one thing. Normal is where things start, not where they end. Around 1:15 a.m., Sierra and Travis left the venue. More cameras picked them up walking together to his car a few blocks away. Travis said they drove to a nearby taco spot, grabbed food, then headed to his place. That too checked out. Surveillance from the restaurant confirmed it. He held the takeout bag. She leaned against her bike, yawning. They reached his house around 1:35 a.m. According to Travis, they sat on the porch steps, ate quietly. He said Sierra looked tired. Said she refused his offer to stay the night. Said she insisted on biking home. She said she had to be up early, Travis told Keene in his first formal interview. Her sister's graduation. She didn't want to be late. Keene asked him to repeat that 3 times. He did. Same tone. Same words. At 1:45 a.m., the last confirmed image of Sierra was captured by a passing city bus. She was riding her bike along Stanton Road, headed west toward her neighborhood. The timestamp matched Travis's account almost to the second. Keene played the clip over and over. No traffic, no pedestrians, just Sierra under the glow of a flickering streetlight, pedaling steadily, her backpack bouncing with each push. But as the bus continued forward, another vehicle came into frame. A white Chevy Silverado moving slowly, deliberately, just half a block behind her. The moment the truck entered the frame, Sierra turned her head slightly as if she heard something. Or maybe felt it. And then she was gone. No more cameras picked her up after that. No witnesses saw her enter her neighborhood. No alarms were raised. Just a blank space in the timeline and a growing silence no one could explain. The next morning, flyers went up across town. The Langston family set up a volunteer post in the gymnasium of Meadowbrook State College. Students, neighbors, people who'd never even met Sierra came to help. They printed search maps, highlighted camera locations, and organized foot patrols along every possible bike route. It was one of those volunteers, a grad student named Mia, who raised the first chilling question. Has anyone looked into that truck? The footage of the white Chevy was grainy, but enough to ID the make and model. No license plate visible. No decal. Just a clean, late 2000s Silverado. Common enough to blend in. Distinct enough to become the single focus of the entire investigation. Keene requested DMV records for registered white Silverados within a 50-mile radius. There were 327. That was day 4. By day 6, the tone had changed. The Langstons were holding press conferences. A reward fund was growing. Candlelight vigils were happening nightly in front of the college gates. But there were no new sightings. No signals from Sierra's phone. Her bank card hadn't been used. And then, finally, something broke. 2 hikers in a fishing boat along Hollow Pine Crossing, a wooded stream just outside county lines, noticed something under a moss-covered slab beneath the bridge. What they thought was an abandoned grocery cart turned out to be a mangled bicycle. The serial number on the frame was scratched off. But the color was unmistakable. Matte blue with a worn black seat, Sierra's bike. The rear wheel was crushed inward, twisted like it had been hit with force. Investigators noted paint transfer, white. The bike was 45 miles from where she was last seen. Detective Keene drove out to Hollow Pine herself. The area was remote. No homes nearby. No cameras. Just silence, trees, and running water. The kind of place you only find if you already know where it is. Or if you're looking for somewhere to disappear something. They combed the woods. Found nothing else. No clothing. No blood. No tracks. But Sierra's parents didn't need more. The hope they'd clung to cracked that day. Her mother didn't speak at the next press conference. Her father only said one sentence. If someone has her, bring her back. If someone hurt her, say it. Back at the station, Keene ordered the footage from that last night, again. Frame by frame. Angle by angle. She kept coming back to that truck. Something about the way it moved. Its distance. The pattern of its headlights. Not aggressive. Not panicked. Just patient. In every missing person's case, there's a moment where uncertainty starts to solidify. Where a vague fear sharpens into something colder. For Detective Mariah Keene, that moment came the night Sierra's bicycle was pulled from the muddy edge of Hollow Pine Crossing. The damage told a story before any words could. Back wheel crushed. Frame bent. Scratches along the metal. White paint transfer on the chain guard. It wasn't just dropped there. It was hit. Hard. And yet, no body. No clothing. No blood. It was, in the worst way, just enough to move the case forward, but not enough to call it solved. Keene called the department's traffic analyst, told him to freeze frame every image from the final camera that had caught the white truck following Sierra. He was an old-school guy who preferred to print things out, so by the next morning her desk was covered in 8 by 10 photos. Still shots. Angles. Headlight patterns. No plates. No clear driver. But a partial sticker in the back window. Circular. Maybe blue. Possibly a dealership logo. Maybe a sports decal. It was faded, partially obstructed, but it gave her something. Meanwhile, her department received 278 tips about white trucks seen in Meadowbrook that week. Out of those, 3 seemed promising. One was a contractor who worked late-night drywall jobs. One belonged to a church deacon who drove his truck only on Sundays. Both were checked out. Both were cleared. The third? That one was missing. The report came from Haskell County, Texas, just over the Colorado border. A local woman had called in a burned-out truck found in an abandoned ranch lot. The vehicle had no license plates. Tires melted. Interior torched. The body charred but intact enough for VIN retrieval. The VIN traced back to a man named Clayton Reeve. Age 42. Last known address, Delmore Street, 5 miles outside Meadowbrook. Occupation, self-employed contractor. Criminal record, sealed juvenile file, but with a 2002 conviction for aggravated burglary and assault with a deadly weapon. Served 8 years. Released 2010. Most concerning, Clayton never registered as a sex offender, though his charge legally required it. And the icing? He filed a police report 2 days earlier, claiming his truck had been stolen. Keene's stomach turned. She'd seen this before, offenders trying to get ahead of an investigation by muddying the waters first. Create noise. Throw police off the scent. But it always circled back. She issued a warrant for his arrest. Not for Sierra's case, yet, but for failure to register. That was enough to bring him in without needing a murder charge. Enough to ask questions that would make any liar sweat. Clayton was picked up in New Orleans, 800 miles from home, at a hospital. His hand was wrapped. His chest bandaged. He told your staff he'd been attacked by a stranger while traveling. The report he filed with local police? Incoherent. He said he didn't know where it happened. Couldn't remember the street. Claimed he was jumped out of nowhere. No witnesses. No theft. Just vague violence. The wounds, though, were real. Deep knife cuts across his palm. A shallow puncture near his rib cage. Fresh, recent. But Keene had her own theory. Someone fought back. He was brought to Meadowbrook PD on July 5th. The moment he sat in the interview room, Keene noticed it. The fidgeting. The calculated pauses. The odd moments of calm that felt like performance. He wasn't dumb. He knew the system. He'd been in those rooms before. But what he didn't know was just how much they already had on him. They didn't say a word about Sierra. Not yet. They talked about his truck. About the report. About his time in Haskell. About a blue decal on the back window. Clayton didn't flinch. But when they showed him the still image from Stanton Road, Sierra on her bike, the white truck just behind, his eyes dropped. He blinked. Once. Twice. Said nothing. That silence said everything. Keene still didn't have enough to charge him with Sierra's murder. Not yet. But she was close. A forensic team analyzed the burned truck. The fire was thorough, but a few details survived. A speck of blood beneath the rear seat carpet. A single blondish red hair caught in the seat spring. A residue of pepper spray on the front passenger panel. Keene had the lab fast-track results. It would take days, maybe a week, but every hour mattered. Then, on July 9th, Clayton asked for a lawyer. And with the lawyer came a deal. If the death penalty was off the table, he'd talk. The DA agreed. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about the truth. About bringing Sierra home. About giving her family something real, after weeks of waiting in silence. The next day, Clayton gave a 4-hour confession. He didn't read from paper. He didn't cry. He just told it. How he saw her riding alone. How he followed. How he timed the moment. How he didn't mean to kill her, but panicked when she fought back. How she sprayed him with pepper spray, grabbed his knife, stabbed him in the chest. And how, in the struggle, he drew his gun and fired once. One shot. He claimed it was reflex. Then he drove. For 40 minutes. Body in the passenger seat. Knife in his hand. Eyes burning. Bleeding. Shaking. He tried to bury her the next day in Brookhaven Range, near an old cemetery. He couldn't dig properly, too weak. So he hid her beneath leaves. Promised himself he'd return later. Then he dumped her bike at Hollow Pine, drove to Texas and set the truck on fire. He bought a used one just like it the next day. And waited. There's a kind of silence that falls over a precinct when a confession is given. Not the kind that comes from satisfaction or justice. But the kind that creeps in when everyone realizes the ending is going to be worse than they hoped. After Clayton Reeve gave his statement, no one in the room moved for a moment. Detective Mariah Keene simply closed her notebook and nodded once. She didn't say thank you. She didn't look relieved. She just walked out of the room, her face blank. It wasn't closure. Not yet. Because Sierra Langston still hadn't been found. Reeve said he left her in the woods. Somewhere near Brookhaven Range, along Route 62, a few hundred feet from a forgotten cemetery where no one visited anymore. He didn't bury her properly, he said. Just covered her with leaves. Branches. Maybe some pine needles. It was dark, he added flatly, as if that explained everything. Detectives checked aerial maps, plotted possible access routes, and marked the approximate GPS radius. But the area was dense, unpaved, and mostly unmapped, a patch of land between county jurisdictions. The search resumed with quiet intensity. No media. No press. Just a mission. 3 days passed. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Volunteers were held back, replaced with forensics-trained officers. It wasn't a recovery anymore, it was evidence preservation. On August 7th, just before 5 p.m., one of the canine handlers called in a signal. 50 yards off a dirt path, behind a fallen cedar tree, beneath a shallow dip in the terrain. There they found her. Bones. Tattered clothing. A canvas backpack half buried beneath rotting pine leaves. A single necklace still clinging to what was left of her collarbone. Forensic examiners spent hours at the scene. No one rushed. No one spoke unless necessary. The light was failing, but no one wanted to leave her there another night. Keene stood back from the recovery zone, arms crossed, watching quietly. She'd seen death before, all types. But this one sat differently. Because Sierra had fought. Because her family still believed she might come back. Because someone like her wasn't supposed to end like this. And because Reeve didn't deserve to be the last person who saw her alive. Back in Meadowbrook, the Langston family waited for the call. It came at 8:42 p.m. Melanie answered. Her husband was on the floor beside the couch, staring into nothing. Jess sat with both hands pressed over her mouth, as if holding back a scream that would never stop. Keene didn't say the word body. She didn't say bones. She simply said, "We found her. And we're bringing her home." The official identification came 2 days later. Dental records matched. The necklace was confirmed by family. DNA testing from the remains was conclusive. Sierra Langston was gone. And now the trial would begin. The district attorney's office reclassified the case to first-degree murder, kidnapping, failure to register as a sex offender, and tampering with evidence. But because of the plea deal, signed in writing, Clayton Reeve would not face the death penalty. The Langston family had agreed to the terms reluctantly. They wanted to know where she was. They needed to know. Still, when the papers were signed, Sierra's father whispered to no one in particular, "He doesn't deserve to die easy." Court proceedings moved faster than usual. The confession eliminated most of the usual delays. A few protests broke out during the hearings, Not from Sierra's family, but from the public. People felt cheated. A life was taken, and the man responsible would keep breathing. Inside the courtroom, Reeves said nothing. No apology. No glance toward the family. He simply stood still as the sentence was read aloud. Life in prison. Twice. Without parole. Plus solitary confinement for the first 10 years. When asked if he had anything to say, he paused, then shook his head. The judge didn't look at him again. Detective Keene didn't attend the sentencing. She stayed back at her office, finishing the case file, closing out statements, signing off on evidence reports. But she left one sticky note in the file before sealing it. She fought back. That matters. Weeks later, when the press had faded, when the TV stations found news stories, when the volunteers had returned to their lives, the Langstons held a private memorial. It wasn't in a church. It wasn't at a funeral home. They held it at Sierra's favorite place, the Meadowbrook Animal Sanctuary, where she had volunteered for 2 years. They placed her photo near the front gate. Hazel eyes, half smile, auburn braid over one shoulder. Underneath it, a plaque. She never stopped fighting. And now we will never stop remembering. When someone like Clayton Reeve finally runs out of places to hide, not just physically but in his mind, something strange happens. It's not regret. It's not redemption. It's weight. The kind that sits on their chest in the dark, pressing harder with each breath. And sometimes, when the prison gates close behind them for the last time, they start talking. 3 weeks after his sentencing, Reeve requested to speak with a detective. He didn't ask for a lawyer. Didn't ask for a deal. He just said he had something else to confess. Detective Mariah Keene wasn't sure what to make of it at first. She'd seen inmates play games before. But when she sat across from him again in that cold interview room, this time wearing a beige prison jumpsuit, wrists chained to the table, he looked different. Not broken. Not angry. Just empty. And then he said a name she hadn't heard in years. Janelle Frost. Janelle Frost. Missing since June 1999. Last seen at a gas station off Highway 14, near the edge of Ashmill Grove, a rural township an hour south of Meadowbrook. She was 28. A nursing assistant. Mother of 1. No history of running away. No reason to vanish. The case had gone cold within 6 months. No evidence. No suspect. Just a flyer aging on a bulletin board at a diner, yellowed and curled. The family had moved away years ago. The daughter grown. The name nearly forgotten. But not by Reeve. He claimed he met Janelle in a diner, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and burnt coffee. Said she seemed tired. Said she told him she needed a break from her life. They talked. He offered to drive her out of town for a day, just for a change of view. And for some reason she said yes. Keene didn't ask why Janelle would trust him. She already knew. Women are taught to be polite, to de-escalate, to not make a scene. That mistake had cost Janelle her life. They drove for hours, according to Reeve. She began to change her mind halfway through. Said she wanted to go back. He didn't like that. Said she got nervous. Started asking questions. Asked to be let out. That was when the story turned. He didn't go into detail. Not like he had with Sierra. Just said, I didn't plan it. But when she got loud, I panicked. He admitted to suffocating her, using a plastic bag. Said she struggled. Said she begged. Said nothing after that. He dumped her body off a dirt road just outside a livestock feed station in Fallon Township. Covered her with trash bags. Weighed her down with broken concrete blocks. No grave. No cross. No name. Just distance. Keene sent a team out to the location that same afternoon. It took 2 days. On the third morning, buried beneath a pile of debris and rusted fence wire, they found partial skeletal remains. The dental records came back 2 weeks later. Janelle Frost had been found. News didn't travel far. No press release. No cameras. Keene drove 3 hours herself to find Janelle's daughter, now 29, working as a physical therapist in Denver. She'd changed her name, built a life, raised a child of her own. Keene handed her the report personally. She read it silently. Then she whispered, I always knew. I just didn't know where. Back at the prison, Reeve said nothing more. No additional cases. No theatrics. He returned to his cell in solitary confinement and resumed his routine. Silence, 2 books, 3 meals, 4 walls. And one truth he would never escape. He wasn't just a murderer. He was a coward. He only confessed when there was nothing left to lose. For Keene, it didn't bring satisfaction. But it brought finality. 2 families now had answers. 2 women could be buried with names. And one man, who thought he could outdrive his past, was finally completely known. The department quietly reopened 3 more cold cases from the late 90s with similar victim profiles. So far, nothing matched. But Keene left a note on Reeves' file before closing it again. Keep him breathing. He may talk again. In Meadowbrook, life returned to rhythm. Campus reopened. The Violet Room hosted new bands. People walked their dogs, rode their bikes, bought coffee. But there's a plaque now in the student garden, near a bench where Sierra once read between classes. She never made it home. But she made us care. There are some crimes that happen out there, in the woods, on empty roads, in places where no one's watching. And then there are others that try to happen inside the walls that were built to contain people like him. By the time fall arrived in Colorado, Clayton Reeve had already been in Rockfield Correctional Facility for 2 months. He was held in administrative segregation, the formal name for solitary confinement. A 9 by 7 foot concrete cell. A steel sink. A slot in the door for food trays. No visitors. No contact. No sound except the hum of fluorescent lights and the shuffle of guards during shift change. For a man like Reeve, it wasn't a sentence. It was a mirror, one he couldn't escape. And apparently that's what finally broke him. On the morning of October 15th, just after 6 a.m., a corrections officer doing routine checks noticed something strange. A cell vent was loose. Not detached, just loosened like someone had tested the limits but stopped short of being obvious. They flagged it, logged it, tightened the bolts. But they didn't report it as an immediate security threat. That was their mistake. 2 days later, during morning yard rotations, a heavy fog rolled in from the foothills. It covered the outer yard like a curtain, blurring the fences, softening the spotlights. That's when Reeve made his move. He had managed to stash wire cutters, likely stolen from a maintenance cart weeks earlier. Used a scrap of soap and powdered chalk to jam the gate sensor, preventing it from closing properly after the previous shift. Then, during his assigned 30-minute solo yard time, he made a run for it. He didn't go through the gates. He went up, climbing a weather-stained maintenance fence, scaling the outer wire frame like a ladder. A desperate climb from a man who had nowhere else to go. The alarm triggered at 6:42 a.m. sharp. It wasn't the camera that caught him. It was the heat sensors on the outer perimeter detecting a human signature moving where no one should be. Sirens followed. By the time officers arrived, Reeve was already tangled at the top, one leg over the second fence, hands bloodied from the razor wire he hadn't properly accounted for. A guard shouted once, "Get down now." Reeve didn't move. A second later, a stun projectile hit the base of the fence. The shock sent him crashing backward, his body hitting the concrete walkway with a sickening thud. He was alive. But his right ankle was fractured, and both palms sliced open. He would never walk the same again. For prison officials, it was a scandal. For law enforcement, it was a warning. And for the Langston family, it was an insult. Because they had believed, as many do, that once a sentence is read and the cell door shuts, the story ends. But for people like Reeve, it doesn't. They keep scheming. Keep reaching for air they don't deserve. After the failed escape, Reeve was transferred to Level 5 Supermax custody in Florence, Colorado, a place designed for the inmates even other prisons fear. No yard time. No windows. No illusions. His remaining rights were stripped. No personal books. No group therapy. No religious gatherings. Only a narrow slit in a reinforced door, and a weekly review to confirm he was still breathing. Detective Keene received the internal report 2 days after the incident. She read it once, then again, then shut the file. There was no satisfaction. No anger. Just this: he still wanted control. Even now. Even broken. Even buried under decades of concrete and steel. Meanwhile, the Langstons stayed quiet. They didn't appear on the news. Didn't make a statement. Didn't show up to any hearings. Instead, they focused on what they could control, the things Sierra would have wanted. Her memorial fund, Sierra's Voice, expanded that month. They opened a new partnership with a domestic violence shelter in Denver, providing emergency foster care for animals belonging to survivors seeking shelter. A young woman arrived one night with a cat in a box and a baby in her arms. She had nowhere to go. The shelter director called Melanie Langston. Melanie didn't hesitate. She drove 3 hours, took the cat, left food and toys, said one thing before she left. You don't have to lose everything just to survive. Sometimes justice isn't a verdict. Sometimes it's what you build in the silence that follows the storm. And sometimes, it's the fact that someone like Clayton Reeve will die alone, unheard, and forgotten. There's a point in every story, especially the tragic ones, where the narrative no longer belongs to the person who started it. It shifts from the victim to those left behind, to those who carry the silence, the weight, the remembering. For Sierra Langston, that moment came not in the courtroom and not at her funeral. It came in what followed, what refused to be forgotten, what quietly, persistently began to grow. It started small. One woman in a shelter outside Denver, clutching her child in one arm and her injured dog in the other. She was fleeing domestic abuse. She had nothing, no money, no phone, not even a clean change of clothes. But she had a pet, and that pet meant something. The shelter couldn't take the animal. It was a liability, a policy issue. That's when a volunteer remembered. There's this program. Sierra's voice. I think they help with this. The call went through. 2 hours later, a dusty silver truck arrived. Inside, a former vet tech, now a full-time coordinator for the fund. She took the dog, filled out paperwork, and left a small card on the table. Read, "You don't have to give up everything to stay alive." Sierra didn't. Neither will you. Word spread slowly, quietly, but steadily. Shelters started printing flyers. Animal clinics waived emergency exam fees for victims with referral cards. A food pantry in Meadowbrook converted its back shed into a makeshift kennel. A man donated an old horse trailer and converted it into a mobile recovery unit. All under one banner. Sierra's voice. Detective Mariah Keene attended the one-year memorial without her badge. No speeches. No interviews. She just stood at the edge of the campus garden, near the small bronze plaque. She hadn't told anyone, but she still heard Sierra's mother's voice some nights. Not screaming. Not grieving. Just asking over and over, why her? It was a question Keene couldn't answer, but she could remember. There was something about Sierra that lingered. Maybe it was the fight. How she didn't go quietly. How she made her killer bleed. How she used everything she had, her phone, her spray, her hands, not just to survive but to resist. It wasn't enough to save her, but it was enough to leave a scar, on him, on the story, on the community. And sometimes, scars are where healing begins. The judge who sentenced Reeve later said off record, "She changed the tone of that courtroom. Most victims never even get to speak. But she did, through evidence. Through the way she fought. Through what he admitted he couldn't erase." By year 2, Sierra's voice had assisted 93 women, 28 children, and over 130 animals, all escaping dangerous homes. Not one had to leave a pet behind. Not one had to choose between protection and love. Jess Langston, Sierra's younger sister, left her job in marketing and joined the foundation full-time. She ran fundraising campaigns, spoke at panels, and quietly, every Friday, she visited the bench in the garden with 2 cups of coffee. She drank one, left the other. No one asked her about it. They knew who it was for. Meanwhile, Clayton Reeve remained locked away. No more headlines. No more appeals. Just a name that faded slowly from public memory, exactly as it should. He never spoke again. Never confessed to other crimes. Never touched daylight beyond a fenced rooftop cage. And no one visited. Sierra's story became a quiet legend on campus. First-year students were told about her during orientation. Professors referenced her case in ethics seminars. Even the local cycling club renamed their annual safety ride in her honor, the Langston Loop. Each participant wore a pin with her initials and the words, "Keep riding. Keep fighting." Sierra Langston wasn't a politician, wasn't famous, didn't have a platform, but she had something rarer. She lived with purpose, and died with resistance, and left behind a voice that kept going long after the noise stopped. Voiceover ends. Soft fade. Black screen. White text appears. In memory of Sierra Langston, 1991 to 2012. Her fight was not in vain. To support the real-world causes inspired by stories like hers, please consider donating to shelters that provide animal-safe housing for survivors of domestic abuse.